Hello, and welcome all to the inaugural episode of Breaking on the Daily, where the name I came up with has been very, very appropriate for this first episode. So, we're going to start with a story from CNN, an opinion editorial, released on the 16th, a few days ago, on Friday, but still relevant, I think, to the narrative of today. And the headline is this: Trump and Giuliani may be useful to Putin, but they're no idiots. Now, this story is completely ridiculous for a lot of reasons. First of all, it peddles a bunch of conspiracy Russia nonsense from years ago that has already been disproven, and all of that. But more than that, it promotes the WAPO narrative that Russian disinformation is what brought out the Hunter Biden story, which over the past few days, that narrative absolutely collapsed. First of all, just 2 days later, from the Daily Caller, we have a story about how Hunter Biden doesn't deny that he dropped off the laptop at the repair shop. And on top of that, just today, the director of national intelligence came out and said that the Hunter Biden laptop is not some part of some Russian disinformation campaign. And then on top of that, Joe Biden said he's not going to appear in anything for the next 4 days, not until the debate. He's not going to do it. Man, this Hunter Biden story has been just the funnest thing. Just seeing everything that has happened with regard to this. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Everything that everyone on the right has been saying for years at this point has been proven 100% correct over just the past week. To take it from media bias to social media bias, where Twitter is still denying the New York Post their account back until they delete the post with regard to Hunter Biden, despite the fact that the only narrative against it has just fallen apart. This is so funny. This is to speak more detail about the actual allegations of the Hunter Biden scandal. For those who somehow don't know about it, Hunter Biden essentially was peddling his influence as a Biden to Ukraine and China while smoking crack and doing a bunch of random illegal nonsense. It's so funny. It is so funny. But that's just the first story of today. Next, we're going to talk about some COVID stories, where Trump said, from the New York Post, by the way, Trump says the U.S. would be in a massive depression if he listened to experts. And yeah, this is essentially accurate. We still have people like Dr. Fauci and other such nonsense mongers and economic illiterates claiming that we need to lock down the country, despite the fact that Fauci has gone back and forth on this more times than a frickin' merry-go-round. We just continue with this narrative. It's amazing. This COVID narrative with regard to lockdowns is just completely unfounded. Because what people, I don't think, realize is that lockdowns are a completely unproven measure for actually going against a pandemic. The reason being that no real large-scale lockdowns have ever really occurred. And when they have occurred, it's never been particularly good. The best you have is small-scale quarantines, which are easier to control and also generally only involve people who are actually sick rather than the entire population. But for something like coronavirus, where there's a large proportion of people who do not have symptoms and, never even really know they had it, it's almost impossible to stop the spread of that sort of disease. That's why it's a pandemic. I don't think people understand what being a pandemic means. Something being a pandemic implies that it can't be stopped. And it displays a large amount of ignorance about both science and population and public policy to say that, oh, we can just stop spread of diseases by telling everyone to stop moving. Yeah, because that's going to function, because that's how life works. We get a whole lot of this, and it just, especially recently, and it has annoyed me to the core that no one bothered to look into this, apparently. On top of that, we also have Twitter with more bias to say, removing a top White House coronavirus advisor's tweet claiming masks don't work, because they don't. Because they don't want the narrative to get through. And this is on top of them blocking a .gov website because it showed the Hunter Biden story. And I think there's something there in terms of a lawsuit against Twitter, because they are now openly blocking government people and resources from the public, which I don't think there's any argument that it is otherwise objectionable, even under 230, that blocking a government website would be in good faith. I don't think that's proper moderation, and I think that there's something there for a lawsuit from the U.S. government itself. And if we see that sort of thing happen in the next few months, next year, I wouldn't be particularly surprised, and I wouldn't be particularly surprised if the U.S. government wins. And on that basis, it'll probably end up going to the Supreme Court, frankly, and if that sort of thing happens, it will fix a whole lot of problems, I imagine. Because Justice Clarence Thomas, for those who don't know, has already made noises about wanting to readjust how Section 230 is actually interpreted. He believes that the lower courts have actually been overbroad in their assessment of what 230 covers. And so if we see that actually get up to the Supreme Court through, the actual U.S. government arguing it, then it's very possible that we see a lot of social media censorship just stop outright, which would be a really, really good improvement. And next on, for the last story of the day, and this is our riot update, we have at the women's women's march of BLM activists reportedly pummeling female Trump supporter, and this from the Blaze. This was just last night, and this woman got hospitalized. This is really, really bad, because we're seeing these more very politically motivated acts of violence much more often these days. And this is, of everything that worries me, and there really isn't a lot that's actually going on currently that particularly worries me deep to my core. A lot of what I see is mostly people overblowing things, and that's my opinion about most news stories that have been released over the past year. We've got things like World War III and all that, but this, where we're seeing weekly or even bi-weekly stories of people who are targeted for very political reasons and being beaten or even killed, it's actually worrying me, because it means that after this election, especially if Trump wins, and based on the stories from the past few days, I think that's becoming more and more likely. This October surprise has been absolutely insane. If Biden doesn't win, if Trump wins, and I think Trump will win, it's going to get worse, at least in the short term. And this is a bad sign. It's worrying, legitimately. I mean, a lot of these people just need to be put in the clinker. They need to be put in the clink. And I think that would solve a lot of problems, frankly. I think that the division in the country is a bit overblown as well. Along with a lot of other things I think are overblown. I think a lot of these sort of political violence problems would be solved by not having, the completely lax DAs that are just letting people out after they assault police officers, or even in these sorts of instances where they're letting go people. It's just ridiculous. We need to stop doing that. And I think there is evidence that in the future, especially after this election, that's going to start happening. And it's going to start happening more often. You're going to get more federal charges with that, and the federal DAs are really, really spot on. They are pretty good, so long as we don't get a Biden administration, of course. Which is why it's important to vote, guys. We're only 2 weeks out, so we're going to be doing this every day, Monday through Friday. That's the first inaugural episode of Breaking on the Daily, and I'm out.